Hello, my name is SIE, and I am a member of the Titanium Knights Team B, Team 15891. This video will give you a brief overview of some of the 2D constraints that are offered in Autodesk Inventor. Learning how to apply these geometric constraints can help you design some really cool things with the program. First off, let's look at the tangent constraint. So the symbol for the tangent constraint looks like that. The tangent constraint makes elements of your sketch tangent to each other. In case you don't know or remember what tangent means, here's the definition. If a curve and a line are tangent to each other, the line and curve only meet at one point. So let's see this constraint in action. So I have Autodesk Inventor opened up here. I'm going to start a 2D sketch, as you can see on the top left. Choose the XY plane. And to show you how the tangent constraint works, first I'll make a circle. Now here's a line. So as you can see, this circle and this line, they're not meeting, they're just randomly in space. But with the tangent constraint, which is in the bottom left of the constraint menu, which is in the middle of my screen, if you press that, it'll make these two elements tangent to each other. So now they meet at this one point there. So this is really helpful. You'll see if I escape out of this, okay. So now these two things are tangent. No matter where I move them, they'll still be like that. Now something that's geometrically interesting with this circle and this line that are tangent to each other that you might know is that if you take a line from the center of this circle to the point of tangency, these two lines are perpendicular to each other. And when two things are perpendicular to each other, it means they meet at 90 degrees angles, like a T like that. So that brings us to our next 2D constraint. What if I want to make like this line and this line perpendicular to each other, if I want them to meet at a 90-degree angle? So the perpendicular constraint looks like this, and you can find it here in the menu. So all I have to do is I press the constraint button and I click one of the lines and the other line, and then look, it makes them perpendicular to each other. But then wait, where'd it go? So it's here. So you might, depending on the circumstance, you might have to drag it over. But usually you'll have another constraint on already, so it won't like move like that. But you see, I just dragged it over, and now these two things are perpendicular to each other. Now actually they're not vertical, but in a second I'll show you how I could make these vertical. But the point is, they're at 90-degree angles to each other. And something that you can do with the perpendicular constraint, which you can do with some other constraints like the horizontal and vertical constraint, are this. So let's say I just have a line here like this. I can make a perpendicular constraint without actually pressing the button. So if I kind of eyeball, see like where would a 90-degree angle be? Like right here, and then it clicks to a 90-degree. So if you just kind of drag, you see, if I drag this line out, it automatically applies that perpendicular constraint. You can see it right there. And so boom, these two things are perpendicular to each other. So we have the perpendicular constraint, but we also have a parallel constraint, which is very similar. So when two things are parallel to each other, they don't ever meet. Press these two items are parallel to each other. Now you might have noticed with my perpendicular and parallel examples that these lines here, they are parallel and perpendicular to each other, but they're not horizontal and vertical, so they're kind of skewed. So what if I wanted to make them straight with this axis here, standing vertically at an angle of 0 to here? So there's constraints for that. So the horizontal and vertical constraints look like this. So for the vertical constraint, I can just, if I want this to be vertical, I just press the vertical constraint and press the line that I want to be vertical, and then it makes it that way. And so now this is at 90 degrees to that, and this is parallel to that. Now with these parallel lines, what if I want to make them horizontal? So with the horizontal constraint, I can just apply it to one of them because they're already parallel. And then now I have horizontal lines and I can do other things with them. Let's look at two very similar constraints, which are the collinear and concentric constraints, which, if you think about their names, are kind of self-explanatory. So first, let's look at the collinear constraint. So the collinear constraint makes it so that two things are in line with each other. It causes two line segments to lie on the same line. So if we see that in action, basically, let's say I have this line here, another line, but I want these two lines to go in the same direction, to be on the same line. So I can just press the collinear constraint, which looks like that right there. Click one of the lines and the other line, and then boom. Now they're both in line with each other. They're in the same line. They share the same line. They're collinear. So with concentric, it's the same idea, but instead of lines, we're talking about the centers of a circle or a curve. So let's say I have this circle here and this circle here, but I want the two circles to have the same center. So if I wanted to, I could do this, but there's a constraint for that too. So the concentric constraint, which looks like a circle inside of a circle, you click it, then you click one of the circles, then the other circle, and then boom, there you go. Now they both have the same center. But this doesn't just apply to circles, it applies to any type of curve. So if I have this arc, and then it's part of this sketch, like it's part of the sketch that has like this, and I have like this arc, this random arc here. These aren't circles, but they'll still work with the concentric constraint. So if I want these two things to have the same center, I just click on the concentric constraint, I click one of the curves, I click the other curve, and then there you go. Now they have the same center. Make sure you don't click on the center point, because you're not constraining. It won't do anything if you click the actual center point. So you click on the edge of the curve, like right here. So first you click the constraint and then the edge of the curve. And then that'll bring the two things to have the same center. And that's really useful in Inventor. So the equal constraint looks like this. It's an equal sign. And as you would guess, if you it makes two things equal to each other. Have an equal size. So let's say I have this line, I have this little small line, but I'm like, wait, I want this line to be as small as that line. I want this small line to be the same size as that big line. So just use the equal constraint. Click on this, click on the other one. Now they're equal. So there you go. Now, for the fixed constraint looks like this. It's a lock. And the fixed constraint locks things together and locks things in place. So let's say I have, so I have this. Now, let me apply the fixed constraint to this line here. Now, you'll see it gets blackened. It's not blue anymore. So now the fixed constraint causes this side to be locked in place. I can't move it. So if I click down and try to push it around, it won't do anything. I can move this stuff, these parts, but I basically constrain this horizontally like this, and it won't really move. So it's locked vertically. So that's what the fixed constraint does. It locks something in place. If you don't want a part, if as you're editing a part, you don't want it to move, then lock it in place with the fixed constraint. You'll know that it's that constraint because it has the lock, and you can think of something being locked in place. Now let's look at the symmetric constraint. The symmetric constraint looks like this. If you hover over this in Inventor, the definition of the symmetric constraint that it gives is that it constrains selected lines or curves to be symmetric about a selected line. So I'm going to use this example that's here. So let's say we had this vertical line, and we had this line here, and this line like this. And what if I wanted these two things to be symmetrical about this line here? So with the symmetric constraint, I click the two things that I want to be symmetrical. Then I click the line that I want them to be symmetrical about, which is this middle one. And then, now they're symmetrical about this line. And you'll notice that as I move them, this is their axis of symmetry. So now they're equal that way. Yeah, like that. So having symmetry in your designs can be very important depending on what you're doing. So thank you for watching this video. I hope that it helped you learn how to use the 2D constraints in Autodesk Inventor to make some really cool things.